Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master. And before we get into today's episode, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and leave us a comment. That helps us out on our end with the YouTube algorithm, but also we love to hear from you guys. We've got an awesome community here, and that's thanks to you. So thank you so much for being here. So, having said all of that, let's dive into it. The prologue to today's story takes place on Earth 550-202-628, where the Spider Man villain known as Venom has taken control of the hero known as Sentry. Venom has also brought his fellow symbiotes to this world, where half of the world's population has now been venomized. And the result is part alien invasion and part civil war. When the adventure begins, Brad's son Damien was playing a version of Spider Man who is native to this Earth, and he is part of the resistance against the symbiotes. Spidey has been following a man who, at first glance, seems to have been venomized, but this guy is acting strangely. So Peter Parker follows him into an alley where we learn that this is actually the villain known as the Spot. He can control how many black spots there are on his otherwise white costume, and he can make those black spots tiny and act almost like pixels to make his costume look just like the Venom costume. So he's been doing this to try to blend in and avoid the real symbiotes from trying to possess him. Spider-Man catches up to him though and makes some charisma rolls to try to talk Spot into helping him. Spot seems to have lost his mind, though, and at first, it seems like it's from all of the symbiotes that are trying to take over. But then we learn that the villain's black spots also double as dimensional portals. And in his travels, he has become aware of the anti monitor. Right now, there is a crisis taking place on an alternate Earth, and Spot thinks that the anti monitor is going to win. And he thinks that this villain is going to bring about the destruction of the entire multiverse. Spider Man argues with Spot, though, and makes several successful rolls of the dice, eventually convincing Spot to take him to where the anti monitor is. So Spider Man can help deal with that situation and then maybe with a little luck get some of the local heroes there to come back here and help out with the symbiote situation. So Spot reluctantly takes Spider Man to Earth 550-000-085, which brings us to the main plot of today's game session when one of those black dimensional portals appears on the Earth I just mentioned, and out steps Spot and Spider Man, who, by the way, this particular Spider Man, since there's infinite Earths, this one wears an all blue version of the spider costume with a tattered red shirt over the top. So he's basically the reverse color scheme version of what the Ben Riley character known as the Scarlet Spider normally wears. So this Spider-Man looks around and he sees countless heroes here, either fighting the Anti-Monitor or the minions of the Anti-Monitor, who are known as Shadow Demons. And with that, we rolled initiative, and Superlion went first, punching the Anti-Monitor while he himself wore the Anti-Monitor armor that he got from Superman Prime. Superlion does some damage, but then the anti-monitor heals from it. Then there is the other Superlion who does not currently wear any armor at all. One of these guys is from the negative universe, while the other one is from the positive universe, right? So this other one without armor throws a punch too, doing less damage because the armor boosts the stats of his counterpart. So since he doesn't have any, he does normal amounts of damage. Next up is Blue Marvel, who doesn't roll high enough on the dice to even hit. And as this is happening, one of the Anti Monitor's shadow demons attacks Spider Man, but Spidey dodges. Spider Man then hits back and does a little bit of damage to the shadow demon. On the Anti Monitor's turn, he swings at the heroes, kind of like King Kong swatting at airplanes. But like Kong, he fails to connect. For the Anti-Monitor's final action, he subs Omnipower for regeneration. So again, at the end of each round, he goes back up to full health, right? So it's back to the top of the order. Superlion hits again, does some damage. Then his counterpart, the other Superlion, does likewise. On Blue Marvel's turn, he hits, but he doesn't do very much damage. And at the end of the turn, Anti Monitor heals. This goes on and on for a while until finally, on one turn, both lions roll high, dealing just a ton of damage. And then Blue Marvel rolls doubles several times. So finally, the heroes manage to knock out the Anti Monitor. By the way, as the Anti Monitor goes to fall over onto buildings and stuff, because he's this huge Galactus size villain, right? The Super Lions and Blue Marvel get underneath him and use their flight and their super strength and stuff like that. And then they slow the fall while directing his descent in such a way that they minimize property damage. They try to lay him down in the streets, rather than on top of buildings. Then the heroes from the Empire get to work taking off the villain's armor. As they do, Spider Man continues his battle against the Shadow Demon, and they're actually really evenly matched. Spider Man throws a punch, and the villain dodges. The villain throws a punch, and Spider Man gets out of the way. Finally, Spider Man starts to shoot webs on the Shadow Demon, and he binds its elbows to its sides. And as the shadow demon flexes to try to break free, Spidey shoots more and more layers of webbing, making it harder for the shadow demon to get loose. Spidey then lands a few punches before finally the shadow demon does break free. And when our friendly neighborhood Spider Man goes to web up his opponent again, Damian, who, by the way, had never played in a game with us before today, rolls his very first set of double ones, right? Which is, of course, in the DC Heroes system, a critical failure. So his web shooters get clogged up. And so, since that's the case, Spider Man jumps onto a nearby building and then scurries around the corner where he starts to deal with this web shooter situation as fast as he can. Before the Shadow Demon can take chase, it gets bonked on the head by a shield thrown by Taskmaster, played by my son. Taskmaster then throws a flashbang grenade, which stuns the Shadow Demon, who, by the way, is vulnerable to the flash power. Spider Man is surprised that in some universe in the multiverse, there is a Taskmaster who actually seems to be on his side. The shield, by the way, then returns to Taskmaster as an automatic action. Then Taskmaster spins in a fluid motion and throws the shield again, rolling very high on the dice and knocking out the Shadow Demon, who then kind of just boils away into nothing. Spider Man finally web slings back over now that his web shooters are no longer clogged. And he says to Taskmaster, "Hey, aren't you supposed to be evil?" And Taskmaster says he gets that a lot. As those two talk in the background, other 1980s pop culture characters are fighting other shadow demons. A more serious version of Inspector Gadget says, "Go, go, Gadget Laser," and shoots one of the shadow demons, who again has a weakness to light based attacks, uh, taking advantage of its vulnerability. While Inspector Gadget's niece, Penny, runs a scan on the Anti-Monitor's armor using a computer that's disguised as a book. The Thundercats fight several shadow demons and are pretty evenly matched. He-Man and She-Ra are here. They also are fighting shadow demons. Power Pack is here from Earth 19840-410, as are Cloak and Dagger from Earth 19830-712. There's even a version of the Justice League from Earth 20040-814, as well as the Swamp Thing and Poison Ivy of Earth 19681-009. At any rate, so since so many 1980s pop culture characters are here, uh, Jason the Wheeled Warriors are also here, right? Which includes the villains from that franchise that are called the Monster Minds. And for anybody who doesn't know, the monster minds are basically these plant-based villains who use the self-manipulation power to kind of reshape their vines and plant matter and stuff like that into weaponry like saw blades, battering rams, spikes, etc., right? So Swamp Thing sees how they are doing this, and then he does likewise. So again, while Spider-Man and Taskmaster are kind of talking in the foreground, in the background, we see all this other crazy stuff taking place. And at one point, Poison Ivy actually wears Swamp Thing almost like the plant version of Hulkbuster power armor, which I thought was actually kind of a really cool idea. Anyway, so all these characters are fighting the villains in the background, which that was Damien's introduction to the multiverse, right? And the crossover nature of our game in general. And he was loving all of this stuff, by the way. Anyway, so as all of these various heroes win their respective fights, Taskmaster and Spider-Man hear comedic complaining from under a pile of nearby rubble. So Spider-Man walks over and lifts a big slab of concrete only to find Deadpool impaled on a piece of rebar and whining about it. So Spider-Man rolls double eights, targeting the rebar, and once this random bit of metal is dislodged, Deadpool asks if this Spider-Man goes by the name Webman. Taskmaster says that's a really stupid name and asks Deadpool if he's being serious. And Deadpool, of course, is never serious, but he does tell both Taskmaster and Spider-Man about Webman, who was a clone of Spider-Man created by Doctor Doom, but on his costume, the red and the blue were reversed. So since this Spider-Man dresses kind of like the Scarlet Spider, but the red and the blue is reversed, Deadpool thought maybe this Spidey was a clone or a clone of a clone, sort of like what we see in an old Michael Keaton movie called Multiplicity. Deadpool suggests that a copy of a copy might be not too sharp. But Spider-Man assures him he is not a clone. Deadpool then asks Spidey what kind of world he's from, to which Spider-Man explains that his dimension has been overrun by Venom and his fellow symbiotes. He goes on to say that he came here hoping to get some help. The Empire is, of course, very happy to help, and the various characters here start to talk about how they could do that. When Superlion returns from throwing the Anti-Monitor into the sun, he suggests a sonic attack of some sort, which prompts Deadpool to bring up Black Canary, who Deadpool apparently thinks is really hot. Neither Taskmaster nor Spider-Man seem to know who Black Canary is, so Deadpool gives them the basic rundown, then wanders off in search of her. Taskmaster suggests using high-frequency sound waves, sort of like the kind of thing you might expect from a dog whistle. So the PCs bring in Tony Stark to help, and Tony sends the various kids who are here, like Power Pack and Wily Kit and Wily Cat, to the resort world of Earth 1707, which is pretty much like an entire planet that is nothing but Disney World, right? Tony then says something about a Venom world being no place for kids. Then he oversees as the Empire dismantles these huge tuning fork shaped towers that are here on Earth 550000085, right? Where there was a crisis taking place. In the original story of Crisis on Infinite Earths, the tuning fork towers, the idea was they were going to vibrate the world so that it was like a ghost, and that objects could pass harmlessly through it. And so their idea was the antimatter wave was going to pass over them without hurting them at all, and then the world would go solid again. But of course, now the idea is, we're going to use the tuning fork towers to just create sound waves to fight off this invasion of Venom symbiotes. So the pieces are taken there. Again, this is kind of like when the 550 million Earths were taken to Limbo to build the Dyson Sphere. The Empire is really kind of borrowing a page from that moment where the portals they can open are smaller, so they got to you break the towers down into smaller pieces to get them through, and then once they're through, they reassemble them and then they activate them. So we see the symbiotes scream in pain and withdraw from everybody they'd possessed. And then the Empire spends some time on Earth 550202, excuse me, 550202, Spider-Man's Earth, where the Imperials play cleanup. And afterwards, Mr. Perfect, who we now see for the first time referred to as the Imperial Executor, he arrives on this earth where he brings order and reassurance to a planet that is still reeling from all of the craziness brought about by the symbiotes. And the venomized heroes had been fighting a civil war against the non-venomized heroes, right? They've been through a lot. And then once everything here is dealt with, the player characters head to the resort world that I mentioned earlier for some much needed rest and relaxation. And it is there that we see Deadpool again, still wearing his costume, but then over top of the costume, he's wearing brightly colored swim trunks and swim fins. He's sipping on a tropical drink through his mask, and he's pestering Black Canary. And that was it. That was how we ended this game session. Like I said earlier, this was actually the first time that Brad's son played the game with us. He did a great job, by the way. Shout out to him if he's listening. On our end, I think it's safe to say all the players had a pretty good time playing this one. As always, we hope you guys had a good time hearing about it. If you did, by all means, we would love it if you took a quick second of your time to smash that like button. Make sure that you're still subscribed because YouTube loves to unsubscribe you and not tell you. And last but not least, leave us a comment, right? And from all of us here at the longest running superhero role playing game on earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.